I wish I were in Torino, but actually I'm based in Cyprus. I'm Fokaides from Frederick Research Center.
Sorry for that.
And I'm presenting for the EPC. Thank you. Okay, great. We also have a laser pointer. So, let me introduce myself. My name is Fokaides. I'm an associate professor at Frederick University in Cyprus, and I'm also a researcher at Frederick Research Center. Today I will present you about the operational rating standard, an initiative that was developed in the E-DYCE project, and I will show you more or less what is, let's say, planned for this activity. However, I do not see my presentation here. This one works. I'm working with this one right now.
Yes, but you're not showing this. It's there.
Oh, okay.
So here you go.
I work with this one. Okay, great. So, to begin with, the definition of the operational rating. This is something that we already have from the standard, the 52000 EN standard. However, due to the fact that I don't read this screen and I have to read there, I need to take my glasses, so I request for 30 seconds. Apologies for that, sorry. Okay, so the EPC worked a lot on the case of the operational rating of buildings. And actually, D2 stands for dynamic and digital. Dynamic, it's a very nice Greek word, which means something that changes with time. This is also what operational rating is about. It's about discussing how the energy assessment of a building can occur, not just once during the design of the building and the commissioning of the building, not every 10 years as the directive is currently imposing, but that can happen on a regular basis, that is on a biannual or even annual basis. And this was a vision that we had in the EPC to bring the operational rating closer to the European citizens, to have a solution that would allow for the regular rating, for the regular energy assessment of buildings. And actually, the tool that was earlier presented by Stavros, I believe that this is the first tool that we have, first software tool that we have available on the operational rating of buildings. The fact is that currently some member states, particularly 11 member states, have a scheme in place for the operational rating of buildings. But we do not have a common understanding in terms of a European standard concerning what is operational rating and how we perform the operational rating of buildings. There are some elements in the EN 52000 standard series, and this is what we read in this slide. We have a definition in the standard about operational rating, what is operational rating. And we also have some, let's say, further classifications of the operational rating, which are shown in this slide here. As you can see, a major element of the operational rating is the fact that this has to be corrected. So we cannot take a measurement and just assess a building. So we always need to correct a measurement, to, let's say, validate a measurement, and to improve it in order to have a correct measurement for an operational rating. And this, of course, is a major challenge that we have in the field. If we could discuss about some features for the operational rating, we know for sure that the operational rating delivers much more accurate results. It's better to measure something, it's better to measure energy consumption rather than doing the calculation of it. And apparently when we do the measurement, when we measure for defining the performance of the building, the results that we have are much more accurate. And this is the one element that characterizes operational rating. What is the second element, which has been the obstacle all these years to have schemes for operational rating being developed? It is the fact that in order to measure, we need to have hardware, we need to have the equipment, we need to have the devices installed in a building that provide the information about the actual energy consumption of the building. And the need for equipment actually hindered all these years the development of the operational rating as, let's say, the major way of certifying the energy performance of buildings. But recently we have a development. This development refers to the smart meters. We know by definition that by 2030, all buildings across Europe are expected to have smart meters installed. The reason for having the smart meters is, of course, not for the operational rating of buildings, it's for the energy market. It's to allow the liberalization of the energy market and the operation of energy suppliers among member states. However, this is a development that also supports the idea of further developing and integrating the operational rating in the European building stock. And this is what we describe now. We expect that in the following years, 225 million smart meters will be installed in buildings across Europe, and this is a target for 2024. The member states have already initiated many actions towards this direction, and we do know that with this development, we will have the grounds, we will have much more information required to extract the operational rating for buildings. And given all the work that was carried out in the E-DYCE and by realizing the conditions currently in Europe in this field, the E-DYCE proposed to the European standardization body a new standard. The title of the standard is shown in the slide. It's called Energy Performance of Buildings, Operational Rating, Requirements for Assessing Operational Rating. This standard was, let's say, proposal for this standard was submitted in September 22. It was approved in December 22, and in February 23, we had our kickoff meeting, our first physical meeting, with 19 CEN members. That was in Berlin, in DIN, to initiate the activities, the actions, all the required steps in order to develop the standard for the operational rating. And as a, let's say, summary of the scope of the standard is shown in this slide, we wish to provide methodologies for data acquisition and data processing in order to obtain measured energy performance assessment and operational rating of buildings. So this is the main scope of the standard. And the measured energy performance can be used for 3 different purposes, as we define them in the description of the standard: to rate the entire building or to provide partial performance indicators. I just want to make a statement here. Our, let's say, wording is developed and defined based on the wording of existing standards. So we follow the same rationale and the same approach as for the asset rating standard to validate calculated energy performance and to confirm the improvement of the energy performance of buildings following the implementation of an energy conservation measure. So this is the overall scope of the standard. And we have in the next 2 slides a list, a non-exhaustive list on some topics that we wish to analyze and define in terms of this standard. First of all, we wish to provide the procedures that should be followed in order to derive and deliver the measured energy performance assessment of a building. Now, we have to clarify that these procedures are at this point still not defined in terms of a European standard. So that is why we have identified the gap, and we are working towards delivering a solution and some answers for this one. The other big question that we have in terms of operational rating concerns the reference building. So the vast majority of the member states just provide an energy performance indicator in terms of energy per area. These, though, may not be sufficient and may not deliver comparable results as with the case of the asset rating, meaning that we do need to have some joint understanding and some joint definitions concerning the reference building for the operational rating. Also, as we have seen earlier, the 52,000 standard series recognize the fact that we cannot just use measurements to deliver an operational rating standard. We need to correct these measurements. So in terms of this standard, we also discuss on the normalization procedures that we will need to follow up in order to consider aspects like weather, occupancy, or level of service of the building under discussion. We also discuss in the standard about the indicators. So there are numerous indicators that can be used in order to characterize the operational rating of the building. You can take the energy of a different service by different carrier, weighted by area, by volume, by the age of the building, by occupancy, by different aspects. So we have defined, or we are trying to define, the different indicators that need to be assessed in terms of operational rating. Also, operational rating is about measuring. So we also need to discuss about those properties that need to be measured in the case where we wish to define the operational rating of a building. So what we measure, how it is measured, in which frequency, under which conditions, boundaries, and so forth. Also, we are trying to introduce some elements which refer to comparison between asset and operational rating. There are some studies in the literature which reveal what is more or less the relation between the two assessments, the two ratings. We wish to introduce some procedures in the standard which will be used in order to assess the performance of the two different ratings. And another aspect, in a similar manner as with the ISO 52003, is that we also wish to introduce some elements concerning minimum requirements for the operational rating. And of course, we also discuss about the equipment. What are the minimum requirements for the equipment which needs to be used in order to get the measurements for performing the operational rating of a building. As said, this standardization activity is supported, is backed up by 3 projects. The EPC project, which is a first generation EPC project for the next generation EPCs, and 2 projects that were initiated last summer, the Smart Living EPC and the Chronicle. All 3 projects have specific tasks and activities which support this standardization activity. And this is very important based on the fact that in order to complete our standard, we will need another 2.5 years at least. So we have another 2 projects that are currently being implemented and will end up in summer 25 that will back up this standard. And at this point, I need to state that in terms of the EPC, the partners that have strongly worked for this standard are, of course, our coordinator CERT, FRC, and UNE, the standardization body of Spain. And these partners are also actively involved in Smart Living EPC and Chronicle. So this secures the fact that the activities related to the standardization of the operational assessment of buildings will be continued and hopefully successful by the end of the project. Now, a tentative structure of the standard as we started developing and delivering the standard. The structure has more or less 5 pillars. The first one is to describe what we assess. The second one, how we assess it. The third one, the post-processing procedures. We also comment on the actual deliverable of the procedure and how we compare the outcomes of the asset and the operational rating. In terms of the first question, what is assessed, we are discussing about the definition of the objects and the building categories that we are assessing. We describe them in the standard, the technical building systems that are assessed, the APB features that need to be considered, the assessment boundaries, the energy carriers, and the energy use. As with regard to how this is assessed, we discuss on the equipment and the instrumentation that needs to be used for conducting this exercise, as well as on the procedures and the practices that we need to follow in order to develop and deliver the required information for performing the operational assessment. We also discuss on the measurement period, that is the frequency, how often we should deliver the results of the operational rating, as well as on the measurement interval, that is what is the interval of consecutive measurements in order to assess the operational rating of buildings. At this point, it is very important to comment the fact that the measurement period introduces new aspects also in the field of policymaking, as a regular assessment of buildings also allows for measures, for policy measures, for improving the energy performance of buildings and brings the EPCs and the classification closer to the energy audits. Having a regular view image of the actual energy performance of buildings allows for safe conclusions with regard to measures that need to be taken in order to improve the energy performance of a building. In terms of recommendations, this was also demonstrated earlier by Stavros when he was presenting the tool that we have, specific recommendations which are quantified and monetized and allow for regular improvement of the building. Also, in terms of how we post-process, we discuss about corrections, how we perform weather-based corrections or occupancy corrections of level of service corrections to the measurements that we have, as well as how we develop and deliver reference values for this purpose. And of course, we also discuss about the primary standard energy performance. And with regard to what we deliver from this assessment, we discuss about the indicators, different types of indicators, and we have here a set of indicators that were used in D2PC for the operational rating. We also discuss about how we assess the different energy carriers, the different energy uses, and as well as how we extract all this information in the certificate. And of course, we also discuss about the compliance of this procedure with other, let's say, PB ratings. Now, concluding, I would like to state that to our point of view, that is a D3PC team point of view, the fact that the Horizon-funded project has resulted to a European standard, or at least is trying to result to a European standard, is, to our point of view, one major outcome of this project of D3PC. And hopefully, if everything goes well, it will deliver a document that will be used for many years by many engineers, by many, let's say, public authorities in order to allow the introduction and the integration and the establishment of operational rating schemes. And my last, let's say, comment, I'm making this comment as a researcher that comes from Cyprus. Cyprus is a member state that has a population of less than 1 million people. So you realize that based on our size, it is very difficult for us to develop. We don't have, let's say, the depth of expertise and knowledge to develop and deliver such schemes. The fact that through a European-funded project, we are trying to develop a standard that may be used not just by Cyprus, but also by Malta, by Estonia, by other member states which do not have the capacity to develop these standards alone. This, to our point of view, is one of the major let's say, contributions of research to the actual needs of the market. I would like to thank you for your attention. Thank you.